Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of Pandemic Definitions 101. This is just a series that I'm filming to help everybody understand the terms that are being thrown around in the media right now. And I said this in the last video, and I'll probably say it at the top of each of these videos. None of this is said in an attempt to sensationalize information or create panic or fear. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The intent is to arm you with information so you understand what these things actually mean as you're hearing the mainstream media or independent media or YouTubers or whoever you're listening to cover anything about the COVID-19 coronavirus. So that is the purpose of these videos. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Again, this is part 2 of definitions. So transmission is the act or process of transmitting something. So if I touch you, I'm infected and you're not, I potentially just transmitted it to you. R0 is something that you have probably heard 100 times in the last month, and so it can be indicated as R and then a little 0. It's also sometimes called the basic reproduction number or the basic reproduction ratio. And what that means in epidemiology is in an infection, it can be thought of as the expected number of cases directly generated by one case in a population where all individuals are susceptible to infection. So for example, if one person had it, and the R0 was 4, then that one person would be presumed to give it to 4 other people. So one person could infect 4 people. Conversely, if the R0 were 2, that one person would be expected to infect 2 people. But R0 is not a ratio or a factor that is associated to a specific disease. So it's not that this COVID coronavirus has an R0 of whatever the stated figure is. It's just that they're looking at how it is spreading in certain areas and saying we believe that it has an R0 of this. All right, droplet infection. So a droplet infection is an infection transmitted from one individual to another by droplets of moisture expelled from the upper respiratory system through coughing or sneezing. So they're a little bit heavier. So if I cough or I sneeze and you're within, striking distance of me, 3 to 6 feet, I assume, then that droplet could potentially come from me onto you. So that would be a droplet infection. Aerosolization is the process or act of converting some physical substance into the form of small and very, very light particles. Light enough, in fact, to just float on the air, like dust particles that you see. And then that's going to bring us to airborne, which is another term that's being thrown around with respect to this virus. So an airborne disease are illnesses spread through tiny pathogens through the air. So if something can be aerosolized, so if I'm infected and I breathe in and then I breathe out, those particles become aerosolized and then that infection becomes airborne. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, a fomite, this is a term I've heard, 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks, is any inanimate object when contaminated with or exposed to infectious agents that can transfer disease to a new host. Some great examples are the ATM, the gas pump, when you're checking out at the supermarket. Basically anything, let's say that I'm sick and I cough and then I touch the elevator button. Well, that elevator button is a fomite. And in hospitals, you typically see things, hair, clothing, bed sheets, all fomites, all things which are capable of. So it says for humans, skin cells, hair, clothing, and bedding are common hospital sources of contamination of fomites. So just, when you're touching things, if at all possible, touch it with something over your hand. As we go forward, I don't know if we're there quite yet, but certainly use hand sanitizer and definitely wash your hands. That's just always good practice, whether this was happening in the world or not, because thousands of people might touch something, so you don't want to do that and then accidentally touch your face or put it in your mouth. Infectious disease, those diseases are caused by microscopic germs such as bacteria or viruses, and they get into the body and they cause problems, right? And some, but not all, infectious diseases spread directly from one person to another. Infectious diseases that spread from one person to another person are said to be contagious. So for example, some infections spread from people to people from an animal or an insect, but are not contagious from another human. So let's say, Joe has, Lyme disease. He can't give it to you, but if you go on a camping trip and a tick bites you, different situation. So that is an infectious disease. A contagious disease, so again, infectious diseases that spread from person to person are said to be contagious. Okay, so contagious diseases such as flu, colds, strep throat, and this coronavirus spread from person to person in several ways. And so we just covered that, and that would be droplet infection through fomites, and then of course through aerosol transmission, you breathing in the air of somebody else who had it. Okay, a host in biology and medicine, a host is an organism that basically hosts a guest. Just like if I'm I'm hosting a dinner party, everybody there is my guest. With respect to this coronavirus, people or anything else that was infected would become the host for the virus, because the virus requires some kind of living organism to replicate itself. All right, contact transmission. I really wanted to go over this part right here because there's just so much, they got it this way, they got it that way, that I think it might help to understand kind of what these terms mean. So contact transmission is direct contact where there's physical contact. Let's say one person, husband is infected, wife is not. He comes home from a trip, he kisses her, he infects her. So that is contact transmission. On the other side is indirect contact transmission, and that occurs when there's no direct human-to-human contact, but rather where there's contact between a human and a fomite, or just an object. So, Joe went to the bank, he touched it, I came along later, I touched it, now I'm infected. Indirect contact transmission. Human-to-human transmission is when people spread it to people. So it says between people who are in close contact with one another, and that's about 6 feet, via respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes, which is droplet infection. And these droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby and possibly be inhaled into the lungs. So human-to-human transmission is not contact transmission, because let's say that Bob on the subway has it. I don't hug or kiss him, and I don't touch anything that he touches, but he's breathing out air, and I'm close enough to him that potentially I become infected. So human-to-human transmission. Community transmission, or community spread as it is being called, means spread of an illness for which the source of the infection is unknown, and it's also possible that the patient may have been exposed to a return traveler who was infected. I'm not 100% sure if I'm in line with this definition, because I don't necessarily think that the source has to be unknown for there to be community transmission, but that's what it says. Okay, a cluster, and we hear this term a lot, is just like a little pocket of people springing up. So people who are densely packed or closely located next to one another, that is a cluster of infections. And then finally, this is the last one for this video, is contact tracing. And we've heard that a lot. Oh, this person came back from China and they're being monitored and we're doing contact tracing. So what that means is contact tracing is defined as the identification and follow-up of persons who may have come into contact with a person infected with the virus. All close contacts should be monitored for 21 days following their last known exposure to the case and be isolated if they become ill. So that's what that means. It's following, so Bob came from China, he stopped in Atlanta, and then he flew on home to New York. Who did he see? Who did he talk to? Where did he go? What did he do? All of those people need to be contacted and monitored for potential infection. So that is going to bring me to the close of part 2. Again, if you didn't watch part 1, you might want to go back and check that out. And again, there are going to be 6 to 8 videos in this particular Pandemic Definitions 101 series. And if you didn't hear the first one, and just the reason for shooting this is I really just believe that if you have any kind of platform and there's any way in which you can contribute to helping people feel calm or at least informed in a situation like this, that you should do that. You should put information out there that is not meant to scare people, but it's actually meant to empower them, to give them the tools to understand, hey, when I hear this on the news, I know what that means. So, okay. And then, you can adjust your threat assessment level accordingly. So that's it. If you found this helpful, please consider giving it a like or leaving a comment if you have any questions or you want me to shoot a video about anything in specific with regard to this virus. And if you want to be notified when I upload new videos, just go ahead and subscribe and click the little bell notification. That way you will know, because as I'm sure you guys all know, anything to do with this virus is being pushed way down in the search results. So if you see this and you find it helpful, please feel free to share it. None of my videos are monetized. I'm just doing what I feel like I can do as a concerned citizen to put information out there in the hands of the general public. So I hope that was helpful, and I will see you guys in part 3. Bye-bye.